everyone had a chance to review the agenda? Any proposed changes?
No, I think the agenda, and I think it should be approved.
Okay. Everyone agree?
Yes.
Okay, approved by consensus. Comments from the chair. Well, the comments I have, I think, are going to be taken up in items 5 and 6. So, I get, one thing we probably should talk about is the next meeting that we have planned, and we can talk about this again at the end of our meeting. See whether we need to have a meeting, is basically what I'm getting at. We're not going to meet on Memorial Day. So, I think at the end of this discussion tonight, we can decide if we feel we need to have a placement meeting there, or if we can just cancel that meeting and not reschedule it. So, wanted to mention that. So that's it for my comments from the chair. Unless there's anything else anyone wanted to add. No. Okay. General business comments from somebody from the public about something not on the agenda. There is no one from the public present, so we will move forward to item 5.
I should add, I did go to the historic preservation.
Okay, yeah.
On Tuesday. All right, it was out in Shields, I don't know how his health is now, and we couldn't muster a quorum. So Ben Huffman and Bob Shield and I were the only people there. Everybody else left. But,
Was Bob a member of the committee?
no, but he's pushing his heresies.
Okay, so 3 non-members. Did you have a discussion?
Well, no. Those are not my favorite people to discuss things with.
Odd things happen.
Yeah, for me. I was thinking of sitting in the singing club, but I couldn't find it.
Well, we'll wait the update after the next meeting. Hopefully Eric will recover quickly.
Well, they have a meeting next week. They're planning to get a bunch of work done.
For that update. Okay, so back to item 5, update from the city council presentation. Mike, do you want to start us off?
Sure, I can give a quick update on that.
So first, I just want to say Mike did a fabulous PowerPoint explaining what we've done in the last year, and what we're working, what we do generally, and what we're hoping to do, and where we would like their support. So helpful for framing everything for them, because there's a lot.
Yep,
If
a lot
you're,
of new
if you're a
people.
new counselor, I think there's a lot of different committees to orient yourself to.
Yeah, and just to get, to make sure the council's aware of some of the things that they, just, they make assumptions and just don't completely understand. Kevin was in the audience, was kind of watching the reaction of counselors on certain things, and some of them were kind of surprised to see that, we were a department of 4 people, including me. It's like, oh, the planning department's just 4 people. That's it. So, so there was those types of things. I thought it was good. I was tired, so afterwards, the next day I had to go and just ask Bill. I'm like, that went okay, right? He was like, yeah, it went fine. So, but I thought it went good. Gave just kind of an update generally on what the department does, what the planning commission was doing, and then we kind of kicked off a little bit of what we wanted, although we kind of had to pull back a little bit because the council is doing a strategic planning process this week to work on what they would like to accomplish as the new council.
I think it was perfect timing. We presented
Yep.
the desire to prioritize the city plan, and by prioritize I mean allocate staff resources for working on the city plan, and gave a proposal of how we would start to do that right before their strategic goal meeting. So hopefully that will bode well for us.
Yeah, I think it was good. It was certainly good timing, but we didn't get the opportunity to kind of get a decision back from them that said, yeah, go for it, because they're doing their more strategic work this week and next week, and hopefully
They
in a
indicated
couple
their
weeks.
leanings.
Yeah, I think we had a pretty good guess as to where people were leaning and what they wanted. So I think they'll see this as a great opportunity, not just for the city plan process, but just for all of their goals, because they really want to, different counselors have different ideas of what they would like to do, but all of them kind of tie back to the city plan being an opportunity to roll those out and explain how we're going to accomplish the goal. So yeah, I thought it went really well.
And maybe it's a good segue into item 6. Now,
Sounds like a
which
good
is the
segue.
Update on the city plan.
I
So,
take it you had something to say to the council, or did Mike do all the talking?
Mike did a lot of the talking, but I did elbow my way in a little
Where
some
did your
elbows.
elbows
Yeah.
bit. Well, Mike was explaining the process that we were envisioning for kicking off the city plan, and I fleshed that out a little bit more. And also stressed the amount of work that Mike does for us, and how their support would be really important in ensuring that he would have adequate time to work on this endeavor. So it was mostly bolstering the presentation that he provided, but then also elaborating a little bit more about the city plan kickoff process.
Any counselors comment on city plans in general or in particular? Or I bet they don't know a thing about it. Someone
We didn't get into any of the substance.
knew.
Yeah, we didn't get too much into the substance, but there were a couple of them that were here from last year's reapproval. So Ashley and Ann and Rosie, and Jack McCullough was on the housing committee, so he's familiar with the plan. But yeah, so I think everybody's got a general familiarity, but none of them have been here to go through an actual readoption process.
That was pretty perfunctory last time, anyhow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that this process will be educational as it unfolds.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Me too.
for everyone.
I think it's a great vehicle to have the council think about some of the broad issues that the city is confronting.
So, to label this, we're now talking about item 6, city plan update discussion. So, as I mentioned, I elbowed my way to the table and introduced myself to the council and explained that we were kicking around this idea that we would invite representatives from the various committees, in fact, the entire committee, to come to a kickoff meeting where they could present their top goals and in a 5-minute presentation, and then stay afterward to socialize, enjoy refreshments, and then kind of on the fly, I realized it would probably be useful if we had 2 of these meetings, because we have one where everyone hears what everyone else's goals are, but maybe we can give them a chance to go back and discuss amongst themselves with their own committees whether anything can be tweaked or tailored to dovetail a little bit more nicely with some of the other committees' goals. Come back together to another all-committee meeting, and then we can figure out priorities from there. And I'm thinking that some of this process in the front end will help streamline later. That was my thinking. So I suggested that potentially having a second meeting to the city council, and they really like the idea. They do want us to check in with them, which makes perfect sense, and it seems like that would be a great opportunity to do that after the second all-committee meeting. So I wanted to get your feedback on this idea. The council was on board with the concept. It wasn't anything that we needed an official approval for. I just wanted to give them the idea of what we're looking to do.
So what would happen at the second meeting? Would there be more discussion, or would it be like pitching ideas?
So I think two things should happen, maybe. More discussion, we would have to structure that, and the way I framed it in the letter, which we can modify in any way we like, but I framed it as you could come forward and say your goals again, if they've changed at all, but also where your committee thinks that those goals rank in terms of priority for the city goals, now that you've heard what some of the other goals are, just to give everyone a chance to see how theirs fits into the broader picture. It's possible that every committee will say our goal is the number one priority for the city, and we'll have to do it anyway. But I thought maybe giving them the opportunity might be a useful exercise. What do others think?
I think there's some real value in everybody hearing anybody else's plans. And you're bound to vote some thought, but can't predict where it would go. But so I like your idea of a second meeting. And,
Or if after the first meeting, presumably there's some follow-up work for them to do in that second meeting. It's like a presentation of like everything that they've all submitted, but maybe curated in a way that brings it all together to get resolved.
I just don't know if we're going to be asking too much. If we want product as well as, because part of the goal of these meetings is to have people thinking conceptually without being too much attached to their work. I find that once you start actually working on something, it becomes harder for you to be flexible in thought process. So that was one thought. I mean, maybe the end of the meeting could be talking about what a actual product is that they should be doing. That's my only concern with that. Otherwise, I'd say, yeah, let's do that.
well, we could make it a tentative second meeting. And we could discuss the results of the first meeting amongst ourselves and decide what would be, we think would be productive.
I think that makes sense. The idea of having something else that comes next is helpful, I think, though, for people, so they're not, you say we're gonna come and talk about goals, then we're gonna come back and talk about just goals again. I think it can be that, but I think it would be helpful to have at least, it doesn't have to be like a defined product or something that's done, but at least a next step, whatever that is, or some other planning element piece so that we're moving, so it feels like we're moving forward.
Okay.
I don't know what that would necessarily be, but.
So are we thinking not have the goals like necessarily stated in the first meeting?
I think that's important to have it in the first
Do you
meeting.
think it's important to have in the first meeting?
Yeah.
So I thought I was hearing that we were moving towards maybe having to say, like, asking for them to come back with goals in the second meeting and the first one being more of.
I was thinking they might revise their goals, but maybe not. Maybe that's not worth, maybe it's more confusing than helpful.
Well, I mean, following up on Stephanie's, maybe the proposal would then be on the second meeting to revise your goals and then to start thinking about what would be some of the strategies you might use to implement those goals, just to start to get them thinking about those next steps. So it's not rehashing the same thing. It is a little bit, but we're kind of taking them to that next level, which will be, all right, now let's start thinking strategically. If you're economic development, what would you do to, if your goal is to create more jobs or to create more whatever, what's your thing that you're going to do to help to move that forward? Or energy, or transportation, or housing.
So if we want to reframe the goals piece and say, or maybe, how about this? What if the letter says, we invite you to come, I don't remember exactly what I said, but the second paragraph, at the kickoff meeting, we ask that you or a representative, and I have some template language here, from your committee, present that committee's top 3 goals for the next 10 years in a 5-minute presentation. So I think there's I put some comment bubbles here to say, do we want to ask for a range of goals, 3 to 5 goals, or limit to 3? and what do you think is the appropriate time frame? And 10 years or 20 years? So I think, based on this conversation, we could say top 3 goals, or however many number we want to do for the next 10 years, or whatever length of time we want to do. But we could say in terms of, and we could use the language evolve, maintain, transform, of how, I think we need to explain that a little bit in the letter too, though, if we're going to use that.
Yeah, if we wanted to, instead of using the word goals, if we want to pick a time frame and say, in Montpelier in 10 years, like what would your committee like to see different? Like pick 3 things that are going to be different about Montpelier in 10 years and frame them in terms of like, what are they maintaining, evolving, or transforming something about our community?
I like that because it's more, what's the content and not, can we make sure it's exact goal language. That feels a little more concrete. This feels like a nice, what are the concepts that we're trying to get to?
And then
Right.
the second
Stuff.
meeting could be pick one of those goals, or whatever we want to call them, and do a 5-minute presentation on the strategy with measurables of how you propose we might get there, and then the other committee could like to give feedback.
Or just what are measurable targets for those? Like how will we know that will have happened, or we will accomplish wherever you want it to change?
So,
Mike, you've met with all the committees. and
Most of them.
Given them the basic idea of what we're trying to accomplish.
Not within this context, for all of them, but most of them have heard the speech.
about language.
Yeah, but they really haven't. I really haven't spent a lot of time kind of teaching them. I mean, we give them the idea of what we had thought about when we were going to do this 2 years ago. So.
Well, I think that's a big part of the all committee meeting, is getting people in the same kind of process. And I thought you won everybody over with your eloquent subject, but
Yeah.
Well, there hasn't been a lot of time to follow up with them to.
yeah, I know. You've been
Who else are deciding that
Busy
process
guy.
right now?
But if that's the case, then I think you're gonna have to carry this. Say, look, this is what a city plan is. We need goals and means to get there, and we need some way to measure it. I mean, that's critical about your style of planning, which is, tell me what you want, tell me how you're gonna get there, and don't just put.
Yeah, there's a
words
lot of
in the
hand
air.
hand holding to force people not to, and that's for all of us to not take the easy road and just say, oh well, we'll encourage it or we'll market it. Well,
So maybe at the beginning and the end of the first meeting, we should allow some time for Mike and the planning commission to address those expectations. And I also agree, I think Leslie said earlier about explaining out in the way that John described it, some concrete things about what expectations are about those goals in this letter. I think the better we explain in the letter, the very first letter about this, the more they're going to provide us what we want. The better we do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like formulating what you want. How do you want to see this city developing in your area of interest in the next 10 years? And stay away from the goals that makes people think a little bit broader. And we can come back and kick each other around and be forced to put it in a simple goal at some point. If they're not very far along in that process, they got a lot of work to do.
So for the tedious task of editing, I'm just curious what language we want to use for getting away from top 3 goals. What do we want to replace it with? I think I've heard some things kicking around, but I'm not sure I know how to edit this right now. So you use some language.
Yeah, I can try editing right now if we want.
Okay.
Got these weird bubbles.
Let's see if your computer allows you to do it. Sounds like educating and then asking for whatever we come up with this language for the first meeting makes sense. Then for the second meeting, asking for how they propose to implement that framework, whatever we want to call it.
What are indicators of?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, what are the benchmarks?
What was the terminology you used within the plan? We planned to do goals, and then what term did you use for the things to get to the goal?
Yeah, we had strategies for the second set, and those were really kind of breaking into, which I presented to council, which was into those permits, programs,
Yeah.
projects, policies. So we're kind of breaking things into those. You know, how do you actually plan to accomplish those goals? Is it through regulations? Is it through one-time projects? And I think we don't have to necessarily get into all the nuts and bolts, but we could certainly, for the second meeting when we send out the second letter, I don't think we have to describe fully how we would have the second meeting in this letter.
Mm-hmm.
I would think we could just go and say in the second meeting we're going to have one where we talk about the concepts of how we would implement, or we would be asking you to come in and give a presentation on how you'd implement one of your goals. And we would give them not necessarily those specific things. Would you do it through regulations? We could do, I think, more leading questions. Would you do it through regulations? Would you do it through a program? Would you do it by...
Well, I think we could present that concept in the end of the first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, ultimately, we're supposed to pull all these things together. So they need, first of all, to convince the planning commission this is a worthwhile endeavor, whatever their plan is. And how it would be the meeting. The second meeting is, are these goals incompatible? Or are they compatible, or are they the same thing? You know, I can see a lot of overlap, and I can see conflicting. There always is, so I imagine there will be. And I'd like to know what the conflicts are between the committees.
So ask them to identify goals that they see as incompatible with the one that they're advancing.
Well, we have in our minutes, one we hear a lot about, but
Transportation and energy.
no,
Which
that's
was in there. Housing and
historical preservation and needs
for the housing.
housing, which I don't think it does, but there is that point of view. So we ought to thrash it out and see whether it's real or not before we begin having goals and conflict, and if it is real, to what extent.
Instead of asking about conflict, can we ask about common ground now? Can we ask, like, how can historic preservation help housing? How can housing help
No,
historic
I'm saying,
preservation?
well, I just think it's gonna land on our lap. So when we get the goals, whatever you wanna call it, we're gonna have to say, well, A is A and B is B, and then really, we gotta talk to these people because they're not gonna work. And invite them to do just what you said, shows it up.
Maybe that's a charge at the end of the first meeting. So now you've seen these other committees and what they're looking at. Where do you see places where you can collaborate with these other groups, or, I don't know, how else you can pull out conflict in a more positive way?
Yeah.
Recognizing that they all have to be in the same plan together. That's the first moment for them to start thinking about what each group is trying to do and how they're going to put together.
One thought I had was, for the second meeting, when we talk about implementation strategies, to probably better for a second letter, like what you were saying, not to try to counter things the first one, but think it might be worthwhile to try to give the categories of implementation tools, like regulations, ones you mentioned. I think a lot of folks might immediately go to regulation and think in that world, and to maybe force people to think about using a variety of tools to get to their goals, require something to be addressed in every like preset of categories that we pull out. So, and you know what those are, right? We already know what kind of broad categories that's there.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a good idea to give like that kind of format and ask for feedback on those categories.
So are those.
We could, I mean, the other thing is, depending on how we structure the meeting, I mean, we've got the presentations from the different committees, and depending on how much of the time that takes, if there are any breakout groups, or whether that's maybe at the second meeting, we work more, or have a session where we have got break people into groups, that's where you can try to ask people to think about things in different, think about how how would you address this? If you had to address this through regulations, but now think about how you would address this through a program. Think outside the box. Is there a program or a project that you could do to accomplish the same thing? We can require everybody to update their windows, or we can give a tax credit to people who do that. It's not a requirement, but we're doing that with the sprinklers. We had a sprinkler requirement that was obviously regulatory, and then we also had sprinkler tax credits to try to encourage people to do it. Now, they eliminated the regulatory one for homes, but the tax credit piece is still out there, so there's still an incentive for people to go through and put in sprinklers into their homes. And there's a lot of those that certain ones have an easier time. Transportation's easy to find regulation that works for transportation and a program that works, because the CIP program or replacing a bridge is a project. So there you go. We want to put in bike lanes. We set aside money and we put in a bike lane. There's no regulation. So they'll have easier ones to go through, but I think some of the other ones might be more challenging.
We have to give some thought to our process after the second meeting. They're going to have to know that the buck stops here, at least as far as passing it on to the council.
And we told the council that was part of my presentation last week, was to let the council know that part of this is deciding who's handling what piece. Public transportation, is that transportation committee, is that energy committee, is that community services? Somebody has to be responsible for planning for that, and ultimately the planning commission is going to be the arbiter of those areas where there's conflict, where energy committee might want to see those old historic windows get replaced while historic preservation wants to protect them. Somebody's going to have to be the one. We'll make the first round of recommendations, and we gave them the heads up. They will be the ultimate arbiter of what our policies are going to be. But I don't think we don't need to worry too much about, because I think there's going to be few of those conflict points, but they're going to come out.
Would it make sense for the second meeting to be more of like a community-wide meeting rather than just the
We can do
committee?
anything we want. We can have 4 meetings. We can have 10 meetings.
The two suggestions from the council, one was that they thought maybe we would benefit from a facilitator rather than having us do it. And then the second one was that there was concern that while we were working a lot with committees, we weren't doing enough to do public input.
Right.
And whether there's a different avenue for that, or this is built into this one.
Right. So if the second one is more of a community-wide one, facilitated by someone like a Paul Costello.
I think your letter might ask them to tell us what kind of community input they've had to date. I mean, certain committees have had public input, others probably haven't, but it'd be kind of a way of telling us the public process.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly ask them to explain that as part of their presentation.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to do we talked about using the second meetings to flesh out implementation, and then after that meeting, it seems like this group will have a lot of information to kind of consolidate. And once we kind of put a draft together, could we possibly have a public meeting on that? To say, this is what we put together from everything we've got gathered so far from the committees, and then start the public stage at that point.
What about this? I like what everyone's saying. I'm just going to reshuffle it a little bit.
You want that?
Yeah, I know. Well, we're bouncing off each other. It's helpful. So the first meeting, I think we kind of all, we have to fine tune it, but I think we've got the concept down. The second meeting could be inviting public and have more of a community-wide discussion about the goals for the city at that point. Then the third meeting could be developing the strategy for measuring whether those goals have been achieved in any way, and then we would have that to work with. That way we'll have the public input before we spend the time working on the strategy.
One thing that would be supportive of having a third meeting being about implementation, you give the committees longer, which could be a concern for some of the committees.
Say that again?
They would have longer between
Oh,
coming
yeah.
up with goals and coming up with implementation.
Yeah.
If you do this a third meeting.
We can do this as much as, I mean, I could just send an update to the council, we've decided to add in a couple extra meetings. But the concept that I pitched was that more process up front is probably gonna help us streamline later, so, and they seem supportive of that. I think after we have all this information, and we've identified where the conflict points are, and how we can present what our conceptual recommendations are to the city council of priorities for the city, and get their feedback before we tell everyone, okay, let's start really digging in to this.
One thing I've noticed through my day job is that if people are asked kind of in the abstract to comment on something, you get like so-so feedback. But if you put like a document in front of them to respond to, oh my goodness, you get all the feedback. So if we can think about that, if whenever we do like reach out to the public, giving them something to respond to, if our goal is to rather just kind of get a feel for things and have it be kind of not reactionary, maybe not put something in front of them, but I think we would get a lot more feedback. We'd probably get more stronger opinions if we put something in front of people. So just like something to keep in mind depending on what we want from the public.
Yeah.
I think we need to pull together a draft and then give it to the public. So this is very much a draft.
Yeah, the problem though, you have to balance that with the perception that we've made our minds up already. Having something that looks really polished can be a bit off-putting, I think.
And I think the amount of time it's going to take to put together a draft, I think we do need to have something. But I think if we're focusing on our goals and aspirations, and just trying to get those ideas out to the public and start to say this is where we want to go, because ultimately we're going to have to sit down and take a lot of time to actually put together the writing of the document. When it starts putting pen to paper and reviewing it with committees and stuff, it's going to take a lot of time. But we do want to get their input early in the process, so they the public helps to set the direction. If we think, oh, we're going to go over this way, and they're really, not going to be interested in having that be a policy.
Kirby's point is well taken.
It's
something that may bite you, you'll pay attention.
It's a catch-22 though. If you don't have it there, then
It's maybe not a great strategy to make people alarmed about what the planning commission's up to. But if you were to put out a proposal that looks kind of official, like you were saying, you will get the most feedback that way, because people will be motivated by a concern that this is real. It's kind of that human nature where until it's real, people don't respond.
You can put out, a lot of the committee's ideas from the first meeting and ours, and say, here's what we heard. What do you like? What don't you like? And what are we missing? That way, we're not starting with. Sure, we should throw out any horrible ideas right away, probably, but something tells me we're not going to get too many horrible ideas, and you can get a sense of where people's priorities are.
How would we put that out, though? I mean, I think that's the piece that we've got to figure out. The devil's in the details. And we don't want to have a draft of the city plan, obviously. But we don't want to have something that's too abstract. We won't get any feedback on at all. So maybe, I mean, we're going to be working on this public document portal, for lack of a better word. We could use that, and we just have to figure out how to present the information in a way on that, whether it's through a memo.
Everyone loves memos, right?
Well, sorry, I'm a lawyer. I write memos. Maybe not memos.
Like a bullet list of what the goals are.
You want a map, I want a memo.
I want a public meeting. That's all right. But I think the point of having something at least that they can respond to, but not something that's fun, that makes me nervous, having something that's like concrete.
And I never,
for people.
practically
Yeah,
speaking,
curvy.
practically speaking, we're so far from that even being possible, that's not
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
But an outline that looks real, or looks like these are what the goals are, it looks like the goals will be at this stage. I mean, something like that.
Yeah, we
Maybe
don't-
One
I think
page is
for a
actually
second
what I'm
meeting,
thinking.
I think we could have that from the first meeting and from some in between work, we could have something that people can respond to, but also say that this is a moment of, well, we can give them an outline of this is what our process is gonna look like from here, we'll have these other opportunities for you to get involved, and so that they know what's coming, so it's not like a draft at the end, and they don't know where it came from.
But I think if it's there, I think if we had, even if it was just a one-page, not really type, but if it was just, that describes each of the committees that came up, what ended up coming out from the Parks Committee, what came out from the Conservation Committee. These were their goals, and this is what they wanted to accomplish in the next 10 years. Now, what does the public think about that? And you might hear from people like, it says, all the Parks Committee ever cares about is Hubbard Park. We want to see parks that aren't Hubbard's Park, and we want to see parks that are in my neighborhood, and that's great. That's that's the input we would want to hear from the public. Is don't worry about that. And if the goals for the Parks Committee were Hubbard Park, Hubbard Park, Hubbard Park, that might be a valuable thing to hear back. Is well, maybe we need to think a little less about that. I don't think that's their goal. I actually think their goal is actually the exact opposite. They are trying to reach out to these other neighborhoods. And
As an example only. Got it.
as an example only, yes. But, I mean, it's the same idea, what Transportation Committee, how they prioritize. If they say, look, our big thing is to prioritize complete streets and getting the bike lanes in. And if you hear more from people that says we're actually more concerned about expanding and building on our sidewalk network, or parking is the most important thing, then, okay, we could take that under advisement. But I think if we had just a brief thing for each of the committees, the public would have something to react to go and say, this is what we hear from the committees. What does the public think of the committee's ideas?
What if in between, after we have sort of an initial kickoff with the committees, we have an opportunity, like a one-question survey that goes out that asks people, what would they want to maintain, evolve, or transform, so that we collect those ideas. When we present them, it's not just the committees, it's like the committees and anyone from the public who can submit at any time. And we can collect those in a centralized place.
The last plan, we had some really vigorous public input, it went on and on and on. And I expect there'll be similar. I don't know how many meetings they had, but it was endless.
So if we can promote, alternative forms, ways for people to participate that aren't necessarily meetings, which don't work for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, now that I have a young child, I'm realizing why a whole demographic is missing during that hour, those 2 hours.
But I think the maintain, evolve, transform is a good basis to work from. 'Cause I think a lot of a lot of the comments that we heard in the zoning process, a lot of it came back to not trying to change my neighborhood. There was a lot of that maintain, and we don't want that to come across as being a negative thing when, you know, it's like, you guys just want to change everything. It's like, well, no, now there's the opportunity to go and say, if there are things you don't want to change, that's as valuable as hearing about the things that you do want to have changed. So,
Right, and be specific. Don't say you want to maintain the character
of your neighborhood.
Of your neighborhood. That's the most useless thing anyone could tell us. Like, what about your neighborhood?
All right, so let's see where we are. The first meeting, we're gonna ask the committees to have a representative give a presentation of areas that they would like to see maintained, evolved, or transformed. And they would limit that to 3 to 5 items. We'll also give them a little bit of an overview of how to use that language. And I think we're gonna have to do it in a letter if we wanna, if we want them to do that at the meeting itself. So I can take a crack at it and send it to you for editing, Mike, because I'm probably gonna get something wrong. And then at the end of that meeting, we'll say, okay, we're going to take what you've told us today and write up summaries that we're gonna send out. Or no, you think that we should just do a survey without, like, a cold one?
Yeah, I mean, we can put all of that up,
Yeah.
what those responses were.
Mm-hmm.
But then we can also,
Send
people
that-
can see those, but they can also just,
Put out a cold survey.
with some introduction to, here's, we're creating a plan,
Right.
but I don't think a whole lot necessarily.
So we could do that simultaneously.
How do we plan to let people know about how to do the survey?
I think Front Porch Forum will get us pretty far.
There's a lot of people in Front Porch Forum.
I assume we could post
And then
a
we'll
link
we'll
on
send
the.
Kim door to door.
Yeah.
There's something here.
You were volunteered to
Second.
go door to door.
That's why I missed it.
I assume we could put a link on the city website, and then we could put a
Yeah.
Front Porch Forum reminding people of it. And, yeah, and a call to a reporter
Let the bridge know.
Yeah.
at the bridge though.
Mm-hmm.
In the second meeting, is that, where do we settle on for that? Are we gonna do more public input there, or are we gonna just take public input not in the meeting? And do a second meeting, talk about strategies for accomplishing
Let's
the
talk
goals?
about the form of the second meeting after we've had the first.
Okay.
If we
But I
move
like
towards
using,
like,
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, I like still having a second meeting for a public input, even if it's just to go and say, this is what we've heard from the survey so far, give people, and, you know, some people, you know, give people at multiple venues to provide comment, and still use that as an opportunity to get more.
I think like the Union Auditorium could be good for that, by the way, elementary school.
Oh, really? Okay,
auditorium.
that, yeah.
There's 100 seats maybe, oh yes, but, so it's not huge, but I don't think we're gonna have, if we were worried about a very large turnout, we could do the high school or something, but, there's like the stage there, and we could, as you mentioned, the facilitator, and ask about, you go through the goals as they look like they are now, and get feedback that way, like goal by goal, or whatever, learn from that. If we decide to make this a meeting about that.
and have
Yeah.
people go around with their stickers.
Yeah, that's what I was just picturing. People, yeah, each committee has its own little
Yeah,
section in the
each-
room, and they have to convince the public that their goals are. So someone has to be standing there and talking about, oh yeah, these are the here's some sort of breakout like that. I think would be helpful. And they could start with the memory or something. But let's take it first.
Okay.
Sorry,
was that other, the charrettes exercise, what's
Here's a
that?
charrette.
What is that?
It's more urban design focused, I guess.
That doesn't tell me much at all.
Like trying to figure,
More
like,
rolling
solve
it.
some sort of design problem and figure something out.
Oh,
I'll
okay,
send
so it's
you
a
a
problem,
memo.
it's a problem.
Yeah, we give you, you get a hypothetical to start to work on, and it's supposed to start to get you thinking about how to, it's kind of an education slash public, it helps to educate the public on, here's your map, where would you put the 100 new houses? If you had to put 100 new houses in town, where would you put them? And so you start forcing people into different scenarios where they've got to start to think about, do we put, a couple in every place, or do we put them all in one place? Or,
So, for our second meeting, I mean, I know Kim's opinion is that we should probably wait and see how the first meeting goes, which is a valid opinion, obviously, and maybe that's what we want to do. But the other suggestions I'm hearing are, we could invite the entire community to a big place like the Union School Auditorium and have an initial presentation about what we've learned from the survey results and how that correlates with what we've heard from the committees in the all-committee meeting. Have more of a general opportunity for people to give feedback, or after that presentation, we could then say, okay, we're going to have the committees in different sections of the room, and they're going to be able to talk more about why this is something they want to see over the next 10 years, and you can go visit them. So that way people can go from one place to another. I do think there's value in having something like that, maybe not as a second meeting, but at some point where people can wander around and really understand why this should happen, or why these goals are conflicting, or just what are, give more deep insight. If you can access any committee at one time, one-stop shopping, it might be really useful. So, that being said, I don't think we have a clear direction of what we want to do for the second meeting.
We can have a tentative plan and then pivot from it.
Yeah.
Depending on if the first goes really differently than we expected.
Yeah, we could be vague and say we'll present next steps and get public input.
We think that no matter what, at some point there will be an implementation-oriented meeting with the committees, right?
Yeah, so that's the
that
third
would be the
meeting.
third meeting, yeah. We're still going to have a second-ish public meeting and a third-ish implementation meeting.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's probably very general.
We don't need to number the meetings. At a future meeting, we will ask you for this.
Yeah, I just think if I can be as detailed as possible in the initial outreach, then it's gonna save me from having to respond to a lot of emails and phone calls, because people will understand what the process is going to be.
I think in that first letter, just being as blunt as, please present your ideas at the first meeting using these 3 terms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have 3 slides and 3 minutes.
I was gonna give them 5 minutes. 3.
Isn't there a lot of committees?
Quite a few.
Yeah, that's a question for Mike. Is how
Yeah, I'll
many
have
we
to go
need.
and, every time I start to write them down, I always end up with, keep finding more.
If you give
I
it
think
3
3
seconds,
minutes
it's
is
fine.
good.
Okay.
And then with transition, that puts us at like 5, right?
Yeah.
And they'll have to send slides ahead of time so we can have them all in one thing, so just transition.
They're
to
just
the
they're
next
just
one.
I'll
like
put you in
going.
charge
They're on
of
a
that.
timer.
Yeah.
Like, this is transportation, your energy's still talking, we're already on transportation.
We asked them to we'll have like an on deck thing, and they have to stand on
You
deck.
have to slowly walk
Yeah.
All
both
right,
times.
obviously we're gonna put Stephanie and John in charge of,
The planners are good at planning events.
yeah, I don't think we do need a facilitator. I could be the
MC.
MC. we're all here today, folks, and then Stephanie's gonna hold you to the clock.
I'm gonna switch the slide when you're done. When I decide to.
I hate sitting in the dark, looking at a screen and some disembodied voice talking.
Yeah, well,
I don't know how you're gonna plan that.
well, it can't be this, because I agree.
It can't be this.
Yeah.
I like your idea of somewhere else, and maybe small auditoriums. But those, repeat myself, I don't like PowerPoint anyhow. That's a killer. People trying to read and some voices coming out of nowhere and you don't know who it is.
Make sure they're standing right next to the screen, in whatever setup we have.
Yeah, but then I'm in a shadow.
Three slides is a good idea. Three ideas, 3 slides.
I don't think we can get away from the
Certainly can.
PowerPoint altogether, Kim, which is, I think, where you're going. But,
Oh, I think there needs to be some visual,
Yeah.
of course.
exhibits.
If you've got a presentation, if you've got a place where you can do presentations that's set up for it, you don't have to be in the dark. I mean, you can watch any of the,
TED Talk?
TED Talks, and, they're not all standing in the dark, they're standing in the light, and they've got PowerPoints going behind them. It's just a matter of getting the lighting correct on the screen.
Yeah.
So where can that happen?
I don't know
I mean,
of
to
the
me,
facilities
it's
here.
not
There
one
might
thing.
there might be some here. I don't know what VCFA has. I don't know how good the pavilion
Last Nation.
presentation is.
I think the planning department should check this out and find out how we can have an effective presentation.
And we can be, if we want the slide to look a very specific way, we can send out one template, everyone fills in the exact same thing, where it just says committee name, one quick thought, and we can limit the amount of words that is. So it's not like a huge paragraph on the screen, it's just 2 lines of text and your committee name. Or something like
I
that.
like being able to see the speaker and have a person visible while something's going on behind him, or however it plays out, but I think
I think the auditorium should have lights like near the stage, so that you can maybe make it less light and near the back, so you can still see this. Okay.
well, you probably got a lot of negotiations with Lost Nation. I don't know how all that works.
So I volunteered to call venues and I haven't. So I'm wondering if someone else wants to volunteer for the job, because it's available.
I can help.
And I've
I
got
can
a
help.
lot of letter
But
writing.
I can't make any promises that the lighting's gonna be to Kim's liking, so.
Well, I don't know, it sounds like there's some
That
pretty
sounds
high
fair.
standards.
Mike says I've heard of such a place.
I've seen I've been to places where they've had presentations, and
Yeah.
you're not
Well,
standing in the dark.
You would think the education department,
Do
I
you
think
think?
the only concern is it dark enough for you to see what's on the screen?
Yeah, unless there's a place that's got a large
Well,
screen television.
well,
I
that-
think
Show,
I
like, the color
know
contrast
what our
and-
first goal is.
People can bring their
the
lights.
students are
Yeah.
sitting down here and that's up there.
No, I think we could say you're in this order, you need one person from your committee, and if this person's up, they have 5 minutes, and then you need to be up here so that you can go next. So
Oh,
it's
sure.
a quick transition, people know. You're number 12. We have to-
I just think to hold the audience's attention, you have to be able to have a good visual about what's going on.
So do we have a projector available?
I think we'd have to look at what the location is. We can get projectors, probably.
We can?
We've got, the planning department has one that's now,
Do we-
I think, on loan over at the senior center.
Do we have a portable screen?
We do, but it's not,
So
it
what I'm
depends how
hearing
big
is
you're looking
So
at.
how do
You
we,
prefer that the
isn't
venue
there,
has that stuff?
there's movie night on the state lawn in the summer. How are we doing that?
That's
That's the equipment we
venue
need,
solved.
right?
Right, just right on the State House.
That's, well, yeah. No. But I mean, that's the equipment that we need is for that. So I'm assuming Montpelier Alive puts that event on. So maybe just a call to Montpelier Alive could be, give us the info we need about the equipment we have available.
Yeah, Dan Groberg may
Yeah.
have some ideas.
No, I mean, a projector can go onto a wall as long as it's white. So if we have a good wall, then we don't need a screen. But,
Well, the union school might be perfect, and then have all that AV stuff, I expect.
They may, but I was just asking to see if we're flexible, if we can bring our own or not. Yeah.
Well, the mayor might have a point of view on the subject.
Yeah, it's gonna be a small projector like this guy.
Well, I mean, that's her business,
Projection.
educating people.
Yeah.
Projection too, but that's another story.
that's our first city goal,
Okay.
is a presentation space.
Step one, we can't do anything if we don't have screen.
So for the
Yeah.
first meeting, we want people to watch a
Yes.
projector though. So
We
I can
wanna do-
find-
yeah,
I can
yeah.
find a venue where that's
I
possible.
think we can make it a reasonable thing to look at and keep people free. Not worried about that.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think the on-deck thing's good,
We'll need a second projector to say who's on deck, but we can handle that.
Someone in the back, can you hold cards out that have like how much time you have left? Remember that from like law school when you have the.
Does that person
oral
also have the
argument?
button up next?
You play something
Stage
muted.
music.
Yeah.
Well, we have some fine tuning to do for our first meeting, but I think we'll manage. Okay, so you'll check into equipment and venue, and I think that the timing for this is gonna be the last week in June at the earliest, because we have to give everyone enough notice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So June or July.
Yeah, see what availability is, and what day of the week and time do people think would be good? I mean, nothing's gonna be perfect for everyone, so, I mean, we could do it at this time, Monday evenings at our usual time, but that might not be.
I think that's the way to do it, because
Yeah.
my schedule gets sort of cluttered on holidays.
You're meant to be retired.
I know. I'll declutter.
Okay. So I guess, our meeting time would be June 25th. So June 25th, or I don't have another
And
calendar
I'll
in front of me.
keep my fingers crossed. It's usually haying time,
Oh,
but I'll
you
keep
know,
my
yeah.
fingers crossed that it.
Actually, I'm supposed to be gone that week. Can we push it to July?
Well,
I think that
okay,
makes
and
more
then
sense,
July
yeah.
2nd
I'm gone
probably
that
sounds
whole
like
week.
not a good day.
Yeah, I'm
Well, we're
gone-
second and fourth, so.
I'm gone the first 2 weeks
Oh,
of
so
July.
it's July 16th, no, it's still, is it July 30th?
You still gone on the 16th?
No, I'm not. Did you just say you're
I'm
gone
gone
the
the
2
first 2 weeks.
I'm gone the first.
So,
Second or fourth Monday in
Oh, so
July?
the
so
16th.
July 9th or 23rd.
Second and fourth is not, is 9th and 23rd. There's also a fifth Monday in July. Not that, I think we wanna push the late July.
I
to kick
can't-
us
I'll shoot for
I
July
can't do the
23rd and
ninth.
then we'll
Yeah,
see.
What if we do an off week for us? What about July 16th?
Oh,
That is DRB, Development Review Board.
We're inviting them.
We'll just cancel their meeting.
Yeah.
Planning commission could
I
do
don't
that,
know.
right?
You're implementing our plan.
So how
Work
about
for us.
July 23rd or 30th? 30th being a
Was
Veteran
it-
Day.
Oh, right, because
Should
the
be
DRB
fifth
doesn't meet
Monday.
on the 5th, right?
Yeah, nobody meets on the fifth. so-
Okay, the 23rd or 30th. Thank you, Kirby, yes.
I think my term is up sometime in August.
Everybody's gonna get
Yeah.
reappointed.
We all get kicked off the
Yeah, we
next
are,
month.
yeah.
You're all
Yeah,
getting
we show up
you're all
now
getting
at the meeting
reappointed.
What did we do wrong?
In October.
What's the punishment?
Was there a
A
change of
charter
Yeah.
change, yes. Yes, because what we've had in the past for the charter was that everyone gets appointed for 2 years, regardless of when you get appointed. So it's not like a seat that we're gonna reappoint in the June meeting. And, if somebody leaves in October, they're reappointed to finish out that seat for the next year or 2 years or whatever's left. So that's not the way the charter's written now,
Is
so
my
what we
term
have,
extended because of the charter change? Or is it up and?
they're gonna go through and reappoint everybody's seats. So everybody, presumably, they're gonna reappoint most of everybody, I would think.
there's 4 of us in the same.
Aren't we supposed to have staggered
Yeah, and they're going to go back and stagger everybody and have a conversation.
Do we know who's up now and later?
I think that, I mean, I haven't heard, but I know if legislature's going out, I assume they've approved our charter change. So probably in the next few weeks, the council's going to go through and reappoint, because they've got to redo the DRB as well, who's really messed up. So they've got 9 members of a 5-seat commission, so.
Yeah, it's just-
They've got plenty of alternates for any
just like a house gets
application.
cluttered after a while, gotta clean it up.
Yep.
That's why you have a Woodstone.
Yeah. No. Okay, so the next thing is, do we want to talk about technology in the context of this letter? It sounds like the letter itself is going to have enough to address without talking about how we're going to do file sharing. So we can do that verbally at that meeting.
Presented at the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did talk to Seth beforehand, and where we ended up allowed us to say Seth could go home, because I don't think necessarily would have got a lot to go over. Although we didn't ask about if we have any web options for public input or not, but we can follow up and ask. The upshot, though, was that Seth will create essentially a folder on the city's Google Drive, and then give me edit ownership over that folder, for which I can add everyone so that they can edit it, and within it we can create essentially a framework in the form of either forms or Google Sheets for how we want these different elements of the plan structured. So, the part of it will be like the what, so like, the goals and maybe measurable objectives, and then like the how, so actions, policies, or strategies, or whatever you want to call them, and then identify with all of those, what do we need to know? Like, is it going to cost money? Who's going to do it? When is someone going to do it?
Is it a high priority? Is it a low priority?
Right. Collect things in a systematic way, and then allow all the committees to have their own if they'd like, and we can just have them all funnel into a single place, so that you can see which ones are actually could be combined, or and it also allows this to be totally transparent, so we can allow anyone to have a view access to what's in there, and also the other part of this was to create essentially a site, like a page for the plan that we could all control and add to and edit fairly easily and quickly. So that could be a landing page for anyone to go, either to find out about what's happening or to provide input, and also a place for all these other documents, like the economic development strategic plan that was developed, or the all the net zero Montpelier plans. They can all, we have one centralized place where you can go get a lot of that background information.
That's great. Thanks, Jen.
Are there questions or thoughts, concerns
I'm
about
happy
that?
as you work on this, because I don't know anything about it, and it sounds like you have it under control.
Yeah.
Maybe at the next meeting, you can give us a quick tutorial of how you're envisioning it working, and then we can provide that for all committees.
Mhm.
We'll just make sure we all understand it first.
Yeah, throw some drafts around. If anyone else wants to try to tackle that initial piece with me, let me know.
So here's what I see as the next steps for this. So I'm going to redraft this letter and send it first to Mike, because I'm gonna be introducing the language of maintain, transform,
Okay.
evolve, and I'm gonna wanna make sure I've described it correctly. And then I will send it to the group. But we're gonna need the venue information before I send it out anyway. So I think, I'm gonna ask you to take a look at the letter draft when I send it to you, but also if you can put together a list of all the committees we need to send it to, that would be very helpful. Kirby's gonna work on finding a venue for July 23rd and 30th. John's gonna work on the background, the Google Drive shared doc stuff. Stephanie, are you up for drafting some language for a survey?
Sure.
That we could all work on or take a look at the next meeting? Because we're thinking about sending that out, making that available to the public simultaneously with our first meeting. So it doesn't need to be for our next meeting, but I just wanted to put it on your radar. And I'm trying to think of what I can assign Kim, but I don't think there is anything
I
else.
think you're doing just fine.
Can you be my cheerleader?
You need to take it up to
He's-
at least once in the next.
Well, you're
meeting.
going, yeah, you're going to
Appreciate your
historic
insight.
preservation, you've got a lot. I think that's it, is there anything else that you were thinking with this? Okay. Okay, we're
Move
gonna,
approval of the minutes.
okay, yeah, so next item, yeah, there you go.
Jump in.
Consider minutes, item 7, consider minutes from April 23rd. Kim just moved approval, did we get a second from
I
anyone?
wasn't here, so.
Oh.
I'll
I
second.
have a comment.
John.
Okay, discussion,
Sorry.
Kirby has a comment.
It doesn't need to be changed really, but just wanted to point out that it says that I had talked to Eric from Historic Preservation, and Eric wants the committee, which I interpret to mean the Historic Preservation Committee, to provide guidance for historical preservation. I don't recall Eric saying that. I don't recall saying that exactly. It may have been, I wasn't being very clear with what I was saying. But, so just to clarify for everyone, in case they have that impression.
Well,
Eric and I
mean,
just talked about opportunities for historic preservation to be, for that committee to be used to work with us in the future. The topic we were talking about was to address affordable housing and stuff like that.
probably just really detailed and make it in here.
Yeah,
So if you have,
I don't, there doesn't need to be a change.
well, we want them to be accurate, and if there's something
Yeah,
small we
it's a
can do.
little vague as to what committee you're referring to. Just say, talk to Eric after the meeting.
I would say just, instead of Eric wants, say, Eric is interested in working with the planning commission going forward.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good idea. That sentence was a little confusing. If that's a motion to amend, I'll second it.
Yeah, so, okay, we'll do that. Any other discussion? All those in favor of Kirby's motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
There was a motion to approve the minutes as amended. I'll make that motion.
It's still on the table.
Okay.
Kim and John are still on the table.
John's your second. I was wondering if we needed to do that. Okay, does your second still apply to the motion to amend
Sure.
the minutes as,
That's
to
good, that's-
approve the minutes as amended? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. They're amended and approved. Final item is adjournment. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Timing.